She was just a preacher's daughter on a tiny island in the English Channel, 11 miles long, 5 miles wide. The kind of place where everyone knew your business before breakfast. All she wanted was a way out. She got one, and then something stranger happened. She became one of the most famous women in the world, adored by princes, chased by crowds, rich beyond anything her small island could have imagined. So how did a girl with nothing pull that off? The island itself is where the mystery has to start, because almost nothing about Jersey in the 1850s explains what came out of it. It was a granite and hedgerow world, 5 miles wide, where everyone's business belonged to everyone, and the social calendar ran on church fetes and the arrival of the garrison. Into this, on the 13th of October, 1853, was born Emily Charlotte Le Breton, daughter of the island's dean, and the only girl among 6 brothers. That detail matters more than it looks. Raised alongside boys who climbed, sailed, and fought. She was taught Latin and Greek by the family tutor, simply because no one thought to stop her. She grew tall, pale-eyed, striking in a way people struggled to describe, without reaching for the sea or the sky. By 16, she'd worked out something most women of her era never got the chance to learn: that being looked at was a kind of leverage. The problem was, Jersey had nowhere for that leverage to go. Marriage was the only door off the island, and every man who walked through the rectory was too old, too dull, or too poor. So she rode recklessly, sailed dangerously, and waited for an exit she couldn't yet name. In 1874, the exit sailed into harbour with a keel under it. Edward Langtry was an Irish widower with a private income, no particular ambition, an 80-foot yacht called the Red Gauntlet. It's worth being honest about what happened next. She likely fell for the boat before she fell for the man. They married that March. She was 20. For a while, it looked like the fairy tale. New coastlines, new cities, a life measured in nautical miles, instead of parish gossip. But Edward had the flaw common to men who inherit rather than earn. He mistook owning something beautiful for deserving it. When they moved to London in 1876, the city didn't care who they were. They had no name, no connections, no reason to be noticed. For a year, they simply disappeared into it. Then came one evening that quietly rewired everything. At a reception at Lady Sebright's home in the spring of 1877, every woman in the room arrived in silk and diamonds, except her. She wore a plain black dress, with nothing on it at all. And in a room engineered for ornament, she was the only thing that looked deliberate. The society painter Frank Miles crossed the floor within minutes to ask if he could sketch her. His drawings were on postcards in London stationers within days. John Everett Millais, the most celebrated painter in England, asked her to sit for a portrait he titled A Jersey Lily, and it drew such crowds at the Royal Academy that a policeman had to stand guard beside it. Here's the part that's easy to miss. None of this happened because photography suddenly discovered a beautiful woman. It happened because photographic reproduction had just become cheap enough to sell for pennies, and a market for images of attractive women sprang up almost overnight. She became, without anyone having a word for it yet, a brand. Her face sold in shop windows. Crowds gathered outside restaurants, on the rumor she might walk past. On at least one occasion, traffic on Piccadilly stopped outright. She earned nothing directly from the postcards, but the fame did something more valuable. It opened doors that had been locked to an unknown Mrs. Langtry of Eaton Place. Edward, meanwhile, watched his wife become famous, with the confusion of a man who'd brought home something he couldn't control. He drank. She barely noticed. And among the men now competing for her attention, one outranked every other name in England. The dinner that changed her life took place on the 24th of May, 1877, hosted by an Arctic explorer with a gift for seating arrangements. The Prince of Wales, 45, bearded, and famous across the empire for his appetite. Arrived expecting a pleasant evening, he left having decided she would be his next companion, and within weeks, the two were inseparable. What followed wasn't a simple affair. It was an entire machine of consent that had to click into place. Piece by piece, society had to accept it, which it did the moment the prince stopped being subtle. The Princess of Wales had to tolerate it. And remarkably, she did more than tolerate. She received her, invited her, treated her with a warmth that still isn't fully explained. And the Queen herself had to look past it, which she managed by saying nothing at all. When the mistress was presented at court in 1878, wearing the prince's own ostrich feather emblem in her hair, for 3 years, she occupied a position that had no precedent. Not a wife, not quite a courtesan, but something new. A woman of no fortune, elevated into the innermost circle of British power, purely by being wanted, and she used the years wisely. She watched who controlled money, who controlled invitations, who controlled information. She learned that beauty opens a door, but doesn't keep it open. Something else has to. She filed that lesson away, because by 1880, the signs were unmistakable. The prince's attention had begun drifting elsewhere, the way it always eventually did. What happens when the most powerful man in England stops writing back? The answer arrived fast, and it arrived as debt. The gifts stopped. The invitations dried up. Creditors who'd extended generous terms to a woman under royal protection abruptly remembered they had limits. She'd been living on the assumption that connection was collateral, and detached from the prince, she was just another debtor with good cheekbones. Furniture went first, then horses, then jewelry. And in the middle of the collapse, she discovered she was pregnant, almost certainly not by her husband. What she did next has never sat comfortably with anyone who studied her life. She crossed to Paris, gave birth to a daughter, Jean-Marie, on the 8th of March, 1881, and within weeks, gave the child away. The baby was sent to her mother in Jersey, raised as the daughter of a brother who conveniently died young. Jean-Marie would grow up, calling her own mother Aunt, and the secret would hold for years. It's the one part of her life she never spun into a story, and the bill for it wouldn't come due for a long time yet. In the meantime, she needed money immediately, and the solution she chose scandalized London more than the affair ever had. On the 15th of December, 1881, she walked onto the stage of the Haymarket Theatre, the first society woman in living memory to become a professional actress. That a woman could be admired for free in a drawing room, but not applauded for money on a stage, tells you everything about how the distinction actually worked. Her reviews were mixed. Her ability to fill a theatre was not. Oscar Wilde, who'd once slept on her doorstep with a bouquet, saw clearly what critics missed. Her talent wasn't acting. It was being herself, publicly, in a venue built to convert that into cash. She booked passage to New York in 1882, and America had apparently been waiting. Reporters outnumbered customs officials on the dock. Her opening night receipts at Wallack's Theatre came to $6,800, $1,000 more than Sarah Bernhardt, the era's greatest actress, had earned on her own New York debut, despite acting nowhere near as well. The point was never the performance. Americans wanted proximity to fame, and she understood that appetite better than any European star who'd come before her. She toured the country by private railroad car. 60 feet of velvet and polished brass lilies, complete with a drawing room and staff quarters, arriving in each city like visiting royalty. She invested $100,000 in Fifth Avenue real estate. On that first American trip, showing an instinct for appreciating assets that none of the men funding her lifestyle ever matched. And in 1882 came the deal that quietly invented modern advertising. Pears Soap wanted her face on a bar of soap in exchange for a fee. No society woman had ever endorsed a product. The practice was considered close to indecent. She said yes anyway. That single photograph became the ancestor of every celebrity endorsement that followed. By the late 1880s, an estimated $10 million had passed through 7 separate income streams: theatre tours, London stage work, New York property, endorsements, admirers' gifts, racing winnings, rental income. Her fortune by 1898 sat near $2 million, something like 70 to 80 million today. She had done what almost no Victorian woman managed: turned beauty, the most perishable currency available to her, into wealth that didn't depend on any man's continuing interest. But the men in her orbit extracted their own price. And here the story turns darker than most tellings admit. Squire Abington, wealthy, possessive, violent, beat her in hotel rooms more than once. And on one occasion, blackened her eye badly enough to keep her off the stage for 10 days. She kept seeing him. Her own explanation, recorded by people who knew her, was chillingly precise. She detested him, but every time it happened, he wrote her a check for £5,000, something close to $600,000 today. A bruise healed in 2 weeks. The money lasted considerably longer. It wasn't affection and it wasn't submission. It was a woman who understood, better than anyone, that in a system built to treat her face as capital, damage to that capital was simply a line item to be billed. Frederick Gebhard, an heir with a fortune to burn, extracted a different kind of payment: emotional ownership. When his private train derailed in Pennsylvania in 1888, killing 14 racehorses, including his prize colt, his first words to her were an accusation, as if her existence had caused the wreck. The relationship limped on and then quietly ended, the way her relationships always did. Not with a scene, but with a slow withdrawal she'd perfected on men before him. And there was still the question no one in London was ever allowed to ask out loud: what had actually happened to the child? Society had absorbed the affair, absorbed the debts, even absorbed the stage career. But a hidden daughter, raised under a false name, a few miles away, was the one fact everyone quietly agreed not to mention, least of all to her. By 1892, she'd found the one arena where her competitive instincts and her contempt for locked doors could finally combine: horse racing. The Jockey Club didn't explicitly ban women from owning racehorses. It simply never occurred to them that anyone would try. So she registered her horses under a name, Mr. Jersey, with turquoise and fawn racing colours. And everyone, bookmakers, aristocrats, the Jockey Club itself, knew exactly who Mr. Jersey was. Nobody objected, because the fiction gave the institution what it actually wanted: deniability. Her colt Merman, bought for a modest 1,600 guineas, went off at 100-7 in the 1897 Esawich. Odds that reflected almost total disbelief. He won, and she reportedly collected around £120,000 on the race, upward of $15 million today. Won in a single afternoon, by a woman technically forbidden from owning the horse that earned it. More trophies followed, ending with the Ascot Gold Cup in 1900, when she stood in the owner's enclosure, accepting congratulations from the same aristocrats who dropped her from their guest lists 2 decades before. On the same day her horse won the Goodwood Cup in 1899, she married Hugo de Bathe, 19 years younger, and heir to a baronetcy. It was a plainly transactional marriage. He got a famous wife, she got a future title, and Hugo's own father was reportedly so furious. He said he wished he could die immediately, just so the disinheriting clause in his will would take effect. He lived 8 more resentful years instead. Meanwhile, the truth she'd buried in Jersey finally surfaced, and not gently. Jean Marie learned who her mother really was, not through a confession, but through an offhand remark at a party. Someone assuming she already knew. There was no scene. She simply left, and then began a withdrawal that never reversed. She married a Scottish politician, had 4 children, and built a life that had no room in it for the woman who'd given her away and spent 2 decades pretending to be her aunt. Whatever conversation happened between them afterward wasn't enough. It couldn't have been. When she died, her will left £10,000 to her paid companion. Jean-Marie received nothing and never explained why she stayed away, any more than her mother ever explained why she'd hidden her in the first place. Her acting, whatever critics said early on, kept improving. She played Rosalind at the St. James's Theatre to sold-out houses for 4 straight months and took 14 curtain calls. The night she opened as Cleopatra. Proof, if anyone still needed it, that the woman who'd been dismissed as a mere spectacle had built something closer to actual craft. In 1891, she returned to Jersey itself, and the island that had once offered her nothing rolled out a reception fit for visiting royalty. Crowds along every street, church bells ringing, the governor waiting to receive her. She stood on the same ground, where she'd once vaulted fences and read Latin with her brothers. 37 years old, rich, famous, adored by strangers, while somewhere on that same small island, a 10-year-old girl, who did not yet know the truth, was watching the crowds cheer for a woman she'd been raised to call her aunt. By the early 1900s, the entire world that had made her possible was quietly dissolving. She'd been a creature of postcards and drawing rooms, of a culture where seeing a beautiful woman in person was still an event worth queuing for. Motion pictures arrived in London in the late 1890s, and by 1910, picture palaces were opening everywhere. A ticket to see her on stage cost real money. A ticket to the pictures cost a penny. In 1913, she made one short film, now largely lost, and the camera simply didn't love her the way a live room had. Whatever quality had stopped traffic on Piccadilly needed proximity, shared air, a shared room, and film couldn't carry it. One critic put it bluntly, A world with the movies and the wireless has more to do than mob a handsome woman. It read as a theatre review. It was actually an obituary for her entire era. The men who had shaped her life were moving on as well. Edward Langtry, the husband whose yacht had brought her off the island, was found disoriented at a transit station in 1897, unable to recall his identity, and passed away shortly after in a care facility. The medical records noting the progression of a long-standing health condition. The royal figure who had once placed her husband at the far end of the dining room ascended to become King Edward VIII, led the nation for 9 years, and completed his reign in 1910, remembered fondly across the country, and by the many notable figures who had shared his inner circle. Whether she reflected on his passing was never recorded. She had always been guarded about the personal thoughts she chose to reveal. She spent her final years at the Villa Lillie above Monaco, gambling modestly at the casino, dyeing her hair the auburn it had been in her youth, dancing with hired young partners without apology, and keeping her poodles in a room adjoining her own. Somerset Maugham, who met her there, described a woman who'd grown old, without growing sentimental. Alfred Lunt recalled the bluest eyes he'd ever seen, and the sense that she was deciding, on sight, whether you were worth the effort. Her 1925 memoir was notable mostly for what she left out. No confirmation of the affair, no mention of her daughter, no account of the men who'd hit her, or the checks that followed. She'd spent her whole life performing for an audience, and the private version of events was simply not for sale, right to the end. What she left behind is scattered across locations that do not obviously connect. In Langtry, Texas, a landmark called the Jersey Lily still stands, named by a frontier figure who wrote her letters and completed his own life's journey in 1903 without ever meeting her. The town draws thousands of visitors a year to honor that historical story. In California, a vine she planted in 1888 continues to produce grapes, planted by a woman who once achieved remarkable success in a single race. At Goodwood, a race still held each year, carries her name. Restricted to female horses, a rule the original title holder would have appreciated. None of these fragments, on their own, fully explain her. Together they point to something deeper. A person who kept creating new avenues for the same enduring question. How do you guide public interest once you have captured all of it? So, who was she, in the end? The celebrated figure, the royal companion, the actress, the guarded mother, the owner operating under a pseudonym? Perhaps the truest answer is that the mystery was never simply her image. It was how completely she understood the dynamics behind it, while observers mistook the surface for the entire story. She completed her life's journey at dawn, on the 12th of February, 1929, at 75 years old, wishing to rest on the island. She had spent her youth seeking to expand beyond. Winter weather delayed the journey by days. At St. Saviour's, tributes arrived from 3 continents. Among those present stood one person few recognized: the former captain of the Red Gauntlet, the vessel that had carried her from the island 50 years before. He placed wild Jersey lilies at her resting place, the only person present who still remembered the young girl. Before the portraits, the royal circle, the endorsements, and the racing titles,